Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and joining me on the show, his triumphant return to Purple Insider, former NFL quarterback, former Viking, Sage Rosenfels. My friend, it is great to catch up with you again on a podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Staying very busy somehow. It's springtime, so it's working a lot in the yard and planting flowers. And just now, having the sprinkler guys come over and readjust my sprinklers because I'm changing some things. I gotta have some more area covered. So just got back from a golf trip to Scottsdale, which was a lot of fun. Desert Mountain. They have 7 golf courses there. A little member guest. I'm not the member. I'm the guest. But I don't know, staying busy. I own a little grocery store in Austin, Texas, which trying to get off the ground, trying to build out a deli. That's the next step, I think. So, staying busy.
That is the most journeyman stuff. It's funny, like you had the journeyman career, but also journeyman post career. And going on a golfing trip is also, if you're a backup quarterback and you can't golf, you might as well just pack it in. Like it's not going to work for you. I think it is an absolute requirement of a journeyman quarterback to be a great golfer.
Yeah, not all quarterbacks are good golfers, but I would say more often than not on an average football team, the quarterbacks and the kickers a lot of times, kickers, punters, pretty good golfers. And so I didn't. That was one of the sports I didn't play in high school, but when I was maybe 13, 14 years old, my summer were made up of going playing basketball in the morning and then playing golf right after that. And it was $50 all you can play all summer, like in the mornings. So I go play 9 holes or whatever, and did that a lot as a kid. Worked at that Iowa State golf course when I was in college, and I shagged. When you're the guy doing the range, once you clean up the range, if you don't have another job to do, at least they didn't ask me to do up more jobs, just clean up the range, which meant I'm gonna go take 100 balls and go, down to the end of the tee box and hit a few out there. So golf's a great sport. It's actually for my body. It's been really, really good because of all the twisting. And so an element of like, I can't really run anymore. I got a bad hip. And so trying to find ways to move around and twist your body and do things other than going for a walk, and or going for a jog for some people. Trying to stay halfway young here as I get to my late 40s.
Yeah, I think for once you hit a certain age, everything is just sore when you wake up, no matter if you played in the NFL or you're a professional podcaster. And golf is the perfect sport to where that doesn't really matter because you're just swinging a club and hitting the ball. But the reason that I could talk golf with you all day, of course, but the reason that I wanted to connect with you is that the Minnesota Vikings have a new quarterback in JJ McCarthy. And while he was behind the scenes last year, he has never played before in the NFL. So I want us to go through what your advice would be in laying out what it means to be an NFL starting quarterback. And not only do you have your own experience starting in the NFL, but we're lucky enough to be on the same team as Brett Favre, Eli Manning, threw footballs to Andre Johnson. So that's a similar experience that JJ McCarthy is going to have throwing balls to Justin Jefferson. So let's just start out with that broadly. He's getting his first chance, but he's getting his first chance on a team that really wants to win and has a lot of veteran players on this team. This is not like a young 5-year plan type of team. They have very high expectations coming off of a 14-win season. What do you think JJ McCarthy's mentality should be going into the spring, into training camp, knowing that he's got to lead the team, but he also has a lot of guys who have been leading the team?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation that he's in. Maybe the best or one of the best situations I think for a young quarterback to come into. And no one wants anyone to tear their ACL, or is that what he tore his ACL or
It
something?
was it was the knee, it was the meniscus, tore the meniscus.
Okay, okay. But looking back, that's one of those silver linings where I tell you what, playing your rookie year in the National Football League is a lot. You're trying to learn offenses, you're learning defenses, you're learning how games work, you're learning situations. For him to sort of redshirt, like for me going to college, the best thing that I ever did was redshirt. The best thing I ever did. And I generally you see a lot of successful quarterbacks come out from this sort of red shirt year. They don't play for a year or 2 years in like a Jordan Love or an Aaron Rodgers situation. And so you've seen that the fact that he got to learn from a veteran quarterback who had the best season of his career, and learn about an offense and learn about defenses and all the game plan that goes into it, and sort of see a guy prepare for 20 weeks, over there, and how he handles himself, right? So perfect veteran quarterback for a perfect guy that was a rookie, put into a situation where one, the head coach is obviously an extremely good offensive mind. He's a former quarterback himself. Former quarterback head coaches, in my opinion, seem to have a lot of success. Not always, right? But Gary Kubiak had plenty of success, right? Even Jason Garrett had his fair share of success. So former quarterbacks. So he's sort of in the perfect coaching staff per se. And as what you said, a talented veteran football team. This is the opposite of like David Carr back in the day. He is not coming there trying to save some organization. This organization is in great position for the long run, by the way. I mean, Vikings fans been around for a long time. I don't know what 1960 something or other when the team started. But the ownership where it is now, the investment they have in the people, the facilities, the city, the stadium, the Viking experience right now compared to 40 years ago. For players, I'm sure for fans, is astronomically better. And so this Will family, they're not perfect, but they make a lot of right moves, a lot more than these other teams. God bless the Mariners have owned the team since 1925, and it's done them no 20 years. They haven't made mistake after mistake, and like rookie mistakes. Overpay a quarterback and not pay your All-Pro MVP running back. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and so he's sort of in the perfect situation from head coach, from team, and from ownership that he could really ever ask for from a young guy. So his mentality is probably going into it is, I don't know. I mean, just do your best. I mean, that's all you can really do. Do your best, play free. I think the last thing you want to do is that expectation can make you feel a lot of pressure. Like I have to play really well because everything is set up for me to succeed. And if I don't, I'm a failure. So probably just to try to go out there and just be a part of the overall outcome of the game, and that's not to try to do too much or play overly conservative. Just play, and I think that what Kevin O'Connell will do is he'll find what he's good at, find what he's bad at. He'll give him some games he might give him more of the reins. Other games it's like, let's call it and run it because maybe this is a more confusing team. The coach wants to have a little more control, right? And so I think what he got to see that rookie year is absolutely huge for him not to play last year.
Let's talk about that a little more in detail about what you can learn in a year where you're not actually playing, because you didn't play right away in the NFL. You were drafted to Washington. You had time to develop there and ended up really getting your chance in Houston to play. Just going behind the scenes a little bit from last year. Now, there's some more technology than when you played. So he was doing virtual reality stuff where they put a little camera on Sam Darnold's helmet and he could hear the play call and stuff like that. But other than that, I think it's probably a pretty similar experience of just seeing how the operation works. And one of my thoughts was that when you get to see how hard it is from Sam Darnold, because that's something you cannot prepare yourself for going from college to the NFL, just how much strain there is mentally, emotionally, physically, the number of injuries that Sam Darnold was playing through, an ankle, he had his hand wrapped, but wouldn't talk about what exactly happened there to his thumb, but I think that may have affected some of his accuracy down the stretch. I just think that when you come from college and you won a national championship with Michigan, you really don't understand what adversity is until you see it up close. But having seen it, he knows it's going to be there and can prepare himself mentally for it.
Yeah, there's that, and probably knowing Sam Darnold's career leading up to it, right, and sort of rooting for this teammate to have the most success he's ever had. I mean, I think that's a learning experience. I go back to my career, how many quarterbacks I played with. Every year is a new room. It is. Rarely do you have like the same 3 to 4 guys, really never, going into training camp, right? You might end up with 2 with a practice squad or 3 or whatever, but 4 or 5 guys. My year could be a Jeff George. All right, 34-year-old Jeff George, still a cannon, and Marty Schottenheimer. The complete opposites. How is this going to work? And it didn't. 2 games in, the starting quarterback gets fired. We had added Tony Banks, who had gone to Dallas, hoping to be the starting quarterback in Dallas. Out of nowhere in the middle of training camp, gets released. When we signed him, it was Jeff George, Todd Husak, and myself, and we signed Tony Banks. Todd Husak, the Stanford quarterback, ends up being the odd man out. This is all happening, and that doesn't happen in college football. Guys, right? Like, and there's Bruce Smith and Darryl Green as your in practices too, and you're taking in these experiences that are just very different than the college football experience. And so, as I said, games unfold and wild endings happen, and the clock, we all watch a lot of college football. The clock is terribly managed in college football compared to the pros, right? Even some of the better, Nick Saban, he probably was one of those guys who was very, very good. But I see it all over college football, mishandling clock situations, end of the half, end of the game, when they go for it, when they do this, holding on the ball and cover 0, and the team's obviously going to give you cover 0. Like, why weren't you thinking about that? It's just such a looser game. And so, the details of the NFL game, but all those experiences to now they're not hitting them every single time. Going into Lambeau, it's not hitting him. Oh my God, I'm playing Lambeau Fields. He's sort of been through it. And as far as reps, that's another thing. He's getting all the 1 reps now. And that's going to be huge for him, where he was sort of, probably splitting them last year. But he started his 3rd quarterback, I believe, and sort of worked his way up, which is naturally what you want to sort of, slowly work them way into it. But he's getting all the reps, and he has all those experiences. And so I'm sure he learned a lot from Sam Darnold and from the head coach and the coordinator and all that. And it's like he already has the answers now. He has seen it, and now nothing is really new. And as you're talking about that technology, that VR technology, before backup quarterback, you stand behind the starter, or the backups are all, and they're watching, and they're trying to. But in this situation, you are visually getting those reps. You're not physically getting them, but visually now, with the cameras being the quarterback's head, you're in the pocket. And I can't even tell you the price tag of a rep, like the value of every rep that you have, and how that can help him from watching last year's reps, from sort of visually through the pocket, but also as he goes into this year, and it's him rewatching himself, in those videos. And so I think I imagine that technology is huge. I'm very visual in that element, and there's so much you can do, 15 yards back, staying behind the get back coaches, trying to sort of see, what the quarterback is seeing. And there's nothing that beats the time, and the thought and the feeling of being inside a collapsing pocket.
So something I wanted to ask about: last year, McCarthy was able to learn the footwork and improve his accuracy because of that between the spring and the summer. And this is just another element of he's not a rookie, because he's already had an entire spring and summer of learning Kevin O'Connell's footwork. I remember last year they were talking about how even just the way that he stood in the shotgun, where his feet were positioned, they were going to have to change because that doesn't work for the timing of a lot of these routes. I
Sure.
would love you to explain like how that works, like why that is so vital to get that down, like what the footwork means, how hard is it to learn, like how's it all sync up
Yeah.
differently, and what it would mean for him to have already understood that from last year.
Yeah. Well, he does have the fortunate history of college football, where he did play for an NFL coach in Harbaugh at Michigan. And so a lot of the footwork, he had done probably most of it. Right. When Andrew Luck came to the NFL, also under Harbaugh, he was sort of NFL ready. And I assume McCarthy is way ahead of the people who are always in shotgun. I called 2 Michigan games a couple of years ago for radio, and they're under center probably more than almost anybody in college football. It's like, oh my God, they're under center. Iowa State, we go under center when we quarterback sneak it, and I feel like that, or kneel it down. And so he has that traditional element already worked in, 5-step drops and things like that, throwing on time, throwing with rhythm. He has a lot of that. In the pro game, you just do more of it. I think that type of footwork just expands, right? And of course, you might have 2 types of play actions in college, and pros you'll have 10, but they're all maybe similar footwork, right? And from a shotgun standpoint, we could have a 30-minute conversation about right foot forward, left foot forward, or even with your feet, right? Peyton Manning, even. Drew Brees, right foot forward. Kirk Cousins, right foot forward. Tom Brady, left foot forward. Brock Purdy, left foot forward. Love, left foot forward. Jordan Love. And what are the strengths and positives of that, right? I played mostly right foot forward. Eli Manning was right foot forward. I believe Eli at the end of his career changed to left foot forward, and I was convinced from going to a few camps, and actually a conversation with Kyle Shanahan as to why they do left foot forward and why it makes sense for them and what the reasons were. And so I'm now a left foot forward guy. So when I teach kids, it's left foot forward. And you're like, well, why? What's the difference? It's like, well, let's just start off. When you throw a football, which foot is forward? The left foot. So why wouldn't you start there? So you can catch it and just go, right? I mean, that's really the number one reason why. So if you go right foot forward, you catch it. Now you have to bring that right foot behind you. So that time right there, you can't throw a ball. And it's just taking an extra, half second, quarter second of time to do that. But that quarter second can be everything in the National Football League. If you asked every quarterback throughout the year, you can have an extra half or quarter second, they would say yes every single time. But as I said, Drew Brees is a Hall of Famer, right foot forward his whole career, because the right foot forward really mimics more under center drop. You're here, and then you're shifting your weight back into the other side, and that's sort of like how it is under center. So that rhythm would stay more the same. But I'm not even sure what you guys do in Minnesota up there with Kevin, but I imagine he has copied Sean McVay and that tree, who all sort of gone in this direction of left foot forward. But the reason is, well, you throw with your left foot forward, so why don't you just start with your left foot forward if you're going to have one? And then it's a little bit more of a shuffle and less of a drop when you go left foot forward. So, maybe that type of thing, those might seem small. Finding each, I'm in the gun, and what would be a 3-step drop? What does that feel like for me? Like, what is that timing where it's not a 3-step drop? Because in the gun, you turn in sort of a 1-step drop, right? It's because it's the time it takes to snap you the football is like the first step and a half of a regular drop. And so you can't take a 3-step drop in the gun for a 3-step under center. So you just like a 3-1, 5 turns into a 3, a 7 turns into a 5. But what do those look like? What does a 3 from the gun with left, or a 5-step from the gun look like with your left foot forward, right? And so trying to probably learn that and learn what feels right and timing is right, those reps are invaluable to just, so you can literally do it with your eyes closed, so you're not thinking about it. And if he did something different in college, those are like habits you have to retrain yourself, and it feels completely new. My guess is he's talking about those shotgun drops.
See, this is the point about the level of detail that exists in the NFL versus, not to say that college
This
football.
is all you do. This is all you do. No
Right.
classes, right? No, this is it. And this is it in the off season. There's no winter conditioning. All right. You keep working on it. And then, the coaches, quarterbacks coaches, and back in the day, it used to be March. You would get there and start having meetings. You only can watch so much film of opponents. We watch a ton of film of ourselves, and really getting into the details of, even the handoffs. You wouldn't believe the little things that go into hand the ball off, of where your eyes are, how you're showing the ball, where your opposite hand is. What you do if you don't hand it off and you pull it back. Pull the string on the back of your elbow. That's the coolest trick in the game, is this sort of, it's like the ball just sort of sneaks out of the belly of the running back and into your lap. And just imagine pulling the string on the back of your elbow. You have to do this over and over and over because those runs have to look just like the passes. And so they get super, super fine detail of literally every step. Every step, could you get 2 or 3 more inches on that first step from under center, or this one when it went a little bit too far around when you drop back. They get so detailed and all that stuff for maximum efficiency. And it's one of those things that's probably not really noticed by most fans because it's all done so well by everybody, for the most part.
Yeah, right. And it is incredible detail. And also from JJ McCarthy's perspective, in an NFL playbook, and there have been some that people have published, like their old playbooks and stuff. So just poking through, every one of those things is in there. And last year, imagine this, he's just arriving now and he's having to learn every one of those details for every single drop, every single play action. Even just getting the huddle together is probably different than it was in college. So him having all of that experience is a lot different too. Now, you played with two of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL. One of them, I would say, would be a model for JJ McCarthy. The other one, I wouldn't suggest anybody try to copy. Brett Favre is his own thing. No one can ever be Brett Favre. Maybe Patrick Mahomes is as close as it gets, but then he doesn't turn the ball over as much. Eli Manning, though, I think would be a great model for a quarterback to follow because think about the pressure that he faced in New York. It was not a success right away for him. It only became a success a little later on. And even then, there was a ton of pressure on him as he went through that. And to become a franchise Super Bowl winning champion quarterback, I know there's debates. Is he Hall of Fame? Is he not? Whatever, man. You beat Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre on the road in the playoffs. You go and win 2 Super Bowls. Like you are, if that's what JJ McCarthy becomes, then the Vikings fans will be as happy as it gets. But I'm just curious about your experience and what you learned about Eli Manning as that true franchise type of quarterback in one of the pressure cookers of the NFL.
Yeah, very unique there. And you brought Favre first. He had a unique skill set. He had an insanely strong arm, and he was insanely strong. He had extremely thick wrists and thick fingers, and it's like he'd been doing hay bales his whole life. McCarthy's not built like that, right? He doesn't play like that. By the way, Favre and I one time talked about Dan Marino being the greatest thrower that ever played the National. No one threw the ball like Dan Marino, right? I saw Dan Marino at Zach Thomas's Hall of Fame induction a couple of years ago in Canton, and you'll love this. Jim Kelly standing there, Damon Hewart, Bernie Kosar. It wasn't just Miami Dolphins; there was Miami Hurricane element to this thing too, and of course Dan Marino. And at some point in the conversation, I said, Dan, I just want you to know, I think you're the greatest thrower of the football that the NFL has ever seen. Very serious like that. He looks at me and he goes, I know. And that's the most Dan Marino thing. That's the best way to describe him on a personal level is that sort of mindset and that attitude. Anyway, going back to Eli. Yes, I got Eli maybe year 9 for him. I think it was 2004. Maybe it was more like year 7. I was in 2010. And they had built up this playbook. Gilbride had been there for a long time. And so he had such a stranglehold on this giant menu of a playbook, right? When you stay in that same system, you can run the same system as the year before, but then you add another 10%. And then you add another 10%, and then you add another 10%. Hey, we got this really weird blitz. We're going to sort of invent this protection for this double A gap blitz, right? And then next year you add an element to that, and then you go off of that. And so they had built up a lot. So I got traded there September 3rd, and for me, I'm walking in, I'm like, this is the hardest playbook I've ever seen. Eli can do whatever he wants, and everything has a code name, and it was just a lot to handle. But what made Eli different, and I don't know when this started, I'd never been to where the quarterback would go in. I believe it was on Thursdays or maybe Fridays. Maybe it was Thursdays. We would go into the running backs room in the morning. Morning meetings, lunch, and then practice after. But we would go in there with the running backs coach, who wouldn't say a word unless he was sort of called upon. And Eli ran the meeting completely. And on Friday after our practice, same thing with the receivers and tight ends. Eli completely ran the meeting. When we see this look with this play called, or this is what I'm thinking, this is what I might audible to, quarterbacks coach Mike Sullivan, who I adored, he wasn't even in there. This was Eli's. And that's the most ownership I've ever seen a coaching staff allow a quarterback to have. I used to think, man, if I was empowered that way, how would I play? And that responsibility. But, Eli had his own clips that he made up. If he did them at night or did them at some time, but in both meetings, he would have put together these various clip reels of what he wanted to show the running backs, what he wanted to show the wide receivers. And I know that didn't happen right away, but at some point, the coaches gave him that ownership. And I think that made Eli out. That makes all the difference. Now you're almost like, there's ownership, there's front office, there's coaches, there's players. Now you're sort of like, I'm in the coach world. But the coach has so much faith in me that I'll make the right decision more often than not. And Eli would audible a lot and throw touchdown passes. Sometimes it wouldn't work out, but they knew it was better than that touchdown pass not occurring because he had on a hitch route. Then Eli saw something, and we get to the right thing. And so they made a lot of hay on Eli's audibles. And so when I get in there, I'm like, I'm a call it and run it kind. Give me a play, I'll find you a completion or try to, or I'll hand the ball off the right way. But for me to sort of go beyond that, I hadn't moved as a player into the role of deciding. I didn't want to call the plays during 2 minutes because if I called the wrong one, now it's my fault. So give me it's gonna take you 2 seconds. You call the freaking plays. You guys got. I'm out here trying to figure out where the ball's spotting, get people lined up. The last thing I can think about is the down and distance and time on the clock. Too much, and to call the right play. And so but Eli wanted that. He liked calling those plays. He'd sort of look around, and he had the playbook down so well that he, and also was empowered by it. So I think that's probably what made him this sort of special New York Giants quarterback. And I don't know how many. It's a great stat for you. How many quarterbacks played for one franchise for 16 years or something like that? I mean, very, very few. I would say less than 10 in the National Football League, maybe 5 played for one franchise that long.
Well, and this really speaks to the Vikings' plan of having Kevin O'Connell and JJ McCarthy hand in hand doing this for a long period of time. Because when you look at the Chicago Bears, for example, they draft a quarterback, fire coach, draft a quarterback, fire coach, draft a quarterback, fire a coach. I mean, how can any quarterback really get comfortable with the guy he's working with when that guy's on the hot seat right from the minute that they draft Caleb
Sure.
Williams? Matt Eberflus is a defensive head coach and he's on the hot seat. And the other problem is when you are a defensive head coach, you're hiring offensive coordinators and then they get jobs if you have success.
Well,
And then
not
you
only
have
that,
to replace them, right?
if you're a defensive head coach, you're hiring almost all your coaches don't have jobs. Right? They have been fired or they're at the end of their contract, and that's why they're available. If they're great coaches, they've probably been locked up for a couple of years and they're on a winning staff. And you can't just, hey, I'm going to take your linebackers coach and make him mine because I think he's great. You get the coaches that are available. When you're Kevin O'Connell, he's got himself at the very minimum, right? He's like, and Ben Johnson's that way now, right? By the way, I got to give a shout out to Priority Sports in Chicago, Rick Smith, my old agent, Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell, Dan Quinn had a heck of a year last year all around. And, I'm sure, those coaching worlds go that you'll probably get a few more coaches onto his roster. But I think Ben Johnson's the perfect hire Right. You and I we love talking about various things of quarterbacking in football and offensive football, play action and bootlegs, how effective they are. Eric Eager sent me a text randomly like 3 months ago. Yep. We are again, bootlegs and play action, the most effective plays in football, still are based off of, the few amount of turnovers and all these things that go into it, still the most effective. Um, and Ben Johnson coming from Detroit, that Jared Goff, that's all he did. I mean, they were the play. I don't know, they're probably top or the top two or three play action football teams. And I think Jared Goff is a good quarterback, but I don't think he's great. He's very long. He gets a lot of balls stripped. He throws a knuckler a lot, but the offense was sort of set up in a perfect way with two really good running backs, a really well taught offensive line and tight end group, and under center, outside zone, bootleg and play action. And quarterbacks, Jared played great, and I'm hoping that. What I don't like as coaches, I get there's an element of like, well, Caleb Williams has a unique skill set. So I was like, well, just in case he can run around, doesn't mean you want him to run around. Sometimes it's like, well, we can run plays, zone read, or some sort of deal where the quarterback's running the ball. Well, just because he can run doesn't mean we need him to run to win football games, because Jared Goff doesn't run to win football games, and Tom Brady didn't run to win football games. And so what I hope they do with Caleb is make him a more traditional quarterback. He'll end up running around when he needs to, but don't try to create those situations. And if he can play as well as Jared Goff did, in which he has a stronger arm, throws a better ball, and probably moves around a lot better, and is smaller in the pocket with all of that, why couldn't he be just a much better version of Jared Goff? I'm sure the Chicago Bears would happily take.
I think for both of these young quarterbacks, what those under center plays do, well, first of all, they make the defense think about the run game. So already you're at an advantage there. But then also, I think they just structure really well for a quarterback, where it's after the play fake, you have these options kind of right in front of you. And I know defenses have taken away some of the bootleg stuff because they're sending edge rushers upfield. But even if it's a straight drop back play action, it's sort of right there laid out for you, where it's this, or this, and then you can scramble if you want to scramble. And a lot of times, what the defense is going to do based on how you've scouted them versus some of these play actions. So where the open spaces are going to be. And it doesn't have to be so much, all right, now you've got to go through if this, then that, then this. Like I think it makes it a lot clearer. And you saw it last year for Sam Darnold, how well he was one of the best passers in the NFL with play action and under center. And that's what I wanted to talk about a little more here, is just the setup for JJ McCarthy. You said earlier that it's about as good as it could possibly get. You had a chance to throw to Andre Johnson. He's in the Hall of Fame now. JJ McCarthy is going to throw to Justin Jefferson. He will someday be in the Hall of Fame. What does that do for you? And I'm also curious about the pressure of that too, because I would think it's a little intimidating when you come in and you have somebody that's like, if I don't get 100 catches and 1,500 yards, that's a problem, right? So I wonder what that experience is like, or going to be like, for JJ McCarthy to throw to one of the great receivers of the decade.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big mistake is always trying to get a guy a ball more than you need to. The head coach and the coordinator, and probably in coots a little bit the quarterback's coach and wide receivers coach, their whole job is to come up with ideas to try to get your best players the ball. That's not the quarterback's job. All right, his job is to go through his reads, make sure the protection's right, deliver the football on time, right, to whoever's open because of the structure of the defense and the play design. But it's the coach's job to make the play design to where if JJ, the receiver, is not number one, then he's number two. You just don't put him on the backside and run the comeback for the love of the game, as they like to say. We used to put Andre Johnson all over the place. Right? You put him in sort of that tight end's position. We put him in a 3-point, the tight end position, just try to hide him every once in a while. So like maybe a linebacker would pick him up and right rather than receiver, right? And so it's this moving people around deal. It's also an element of like going and say to empty and putting a running back or 10 on the outside. And if you see corners on the outside, now we're in zone coverage. If we're in zone coverage and we put our receivers on the inside, now our receivers in some way are working against linebackers or safeties, and we want that, right? And so those like little easy completions can add up. But creativity, that's really what there's a lot that. But of course, one of the main things is just high quality plays, run, bootleg, play action, all the passing game, but its ability to one, isolate your best players on not their best players. But two, design plays to where, okay, if they're in zone, we're going to have our best receiver on the inside working the linebacker. But if it's in man coverage and the linebackers go out there and the running backs and tight ends, now we have a man play. So they might have their best corner on JJ in the slot, but he's running a deep crossing route and he's going to whoop him on that deep crossing route, right? And so that creativity is huge as far as getting your best players the ball.
Yeah, and with Justin Jefferson, he can really do anything, and I think that this is going to look quite a bit different than it did with Sam Darnold. Like there will be a lot of the same ideas, but I don't think JJ McCarthy is as much of a drop back and wait till everything develops deep down the field and let it rip like Sam Darnold 35, 40 yards down the field as often as anybody in the NFL did that last year. I think they're going to want to get the football out of his hands a lot faster and let him develop that deep ball. That's something that was a work in progress last year in training camp. And if you have Jefferson, I think we saw it with Kirk Cousins, where Cousins would throw the ball up to Jefferson sometimes, but a lot of times it was slants, out routes, little things like that to get him the football in his hands. And that's something I think that we're going to see a lot more with JJ McCarthy. But the key there for me is he's open when he's not open. And Sam Darnold really bought into that. And I think JJ McCarthy is going to have to adapt to the fact that guys in the NFL just aren't that open. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you expect them to just have 10 yards around them, this was always a Kirk Cousins problem. Like if
Yeah.
somebody wasn't wide open, but I think he's got the mentality to throw tight window stuff, but he's going to have to just learn from that with Jefferson. Just give him a chance and he's probably going to make you right.
In a lot of ways in the NFL, when a guy is covered, he is open. If only one guy's covering him. If two guys are covering him, that's when he's not open because then someone else is singled up. And that's sort of, everyone's covered basically in some way. It's just sort of who and how many of them, right? And so I think what defenses do when they get great receivers or great tight end is they sort of have, wherever that guy is, the coverage starts to lean in that direction. We're going to go cover two over here if it's, back in the days of like Randy Moss or Andre Johnson. But if Andre goes in motion to the other side, we'll shift it to the other side because we always want a deep safety to that side because we're so worried about that deep threat. And so, again, stuff like that in college, you just don't get that complexity of smart defense, too. They're not just bigger, faster, stronger. Some of these guys are 32 years old with 10 years of NFL experience and all the looks they've seen with thousands of off-season training camp practices and of course the entire season, all the practices that go into it and all the film sessions. That wealth of knowledge is so far beyond a 21-year-old what they have seen and what their defensive coordinator can sort of teach them in a limited amount of time. And so there's just so much more that you just learn over time. And this 24-year-old version of this kid is not the end game here. We'll know a lot more in 2 years because you have to sort of keep. That's the thing about Brady and Breeze. I know Drew always had this thing of just getting the edge. He had this thing we talk about just getting the edge, and it was just always a little bit more here, or is it maybe something I'm eating, or is it something the way I'm stretching? Is there some new machine out there that can help with my shoulder? Like a little more shoulder flexibility or this or that, or, is it Pilates? Is it this? Drew is always, I know Brady was in the same deal, always looking to get an edge because that's the only way to improve. And, if this kid has that type of mindset that really, gone are the days of smoking cigarettes at halftime back in the 60s, right? It's, or having a beer at halftime in the 70s, right? Or even 80s probably. But there's so much now, like knowledge out there of like peak performance for the athlete, physically, mentally, emotionally. Eli Manning, I go back to Eli real quick. We play our, we're going into the first game of the year. I had just been traded there a few days earlier. I go in on the Sunday morning, right? You have that Thursday preseason game back in the day, and then you have like sort of the weekend off, and then come back Monday for game week. I went on Sunday because I'm just trying to like learn this playbook, and I walk in the quarterback's room, and Eli's sitting there with this guy in the suit, and he was sort of a sports psychologist, I would assume, some sort of sports psychologist. All the walls that had the boards on them were all filled with various things, and I just peeked my head in for a couple seconds. Oh, sorry guys, said hi, But I remember vividly looking at the board, and it said Archie's son, Peyton's brother, New York City. Big pressures, big expectations, like these things. They had talked about all of that. How does that make you feel? Right? How should we think about that? Archie was your dad and Peyton's your brother, and you're in New York City. And how do we turn that into what's the best way to view all of that? Right? That wasn't around in the 80s, that type of thinking. But that is around now. And so, hopefully he's really maximizing his time to, this is stuff that he'll probably learn as he goes forward. You can't, do everything in a day. That he'll learn these various processes that really maximize him as a player, and overall as a career, maximize his overall value and net worth. Someday, because what's $50 million a year now, and 3 years when his contract's up is going to be 65 probably, or something like that. So I'm sure he'd love to get that huge second contract.
Well, when you talk about that, I mean, that sounds exactly like JJ McCarthy because he's discussed with us. I mentioned the virtual reality, but also meditation, sports psychology, a lot of different stuff. And I'm sure that some of it goes over the top and is unnecessary, but I think it says a lot about him that he wants to be in that world of everything that he does is about him being the best quarterback he can be. And I think that's a major part of what holds some guys back is understanding that it's 365 24/7 is being a QB1 in the NFL.
Yeah,
If I mean, okay, eventually you can
it's a
have
life,
other stuff,
it's a
but
lifestyle. It's a
right,
lifestyle.
exactly.
Right? It doesn't mean that you can't, in the off season, go on some fun trips and do whatever you do. But for but the whole time you can't escape it. You know what I mean? Yeah, that it is. You always have to. You can't make big mistakes. You can't make life mistakes. And a lot fewer than other positions. And so, in some ways, you can enjoy yourself, but you still have to be on. And about the only time you ever see a drunk quarterback is after they win the Super Bowl. It seems like to me, right? Because these QB1s, they know what they're doing, and they there's so much on the line that you have to make constantly good decisions, and decisions that are, I said, there's just invest in yourself. I think as I look back, I invested so little in myself as a quarterback. I rarely got a massage. I didn't do sports nutrition. I drink, protein shakes that were in the weight room, that were free. But, a lot of guys are taking various supplements and this and that and the other. And I just didn't do that. And, sports psychologists, looking back, all that probably would have been, very, very good for me, maybe extended my career and maybe had me play a lot better.
Yeah, well, I think there's just a lot more information on that too. I mean, even when JJ McCarthy was saying that he decided when he was like 12 years old or something that he wanted to be an NFL quarterback, and he used the words edit his life for that. Like he just has taken this path completely to be here, which I think matches up with being around a lot of veterans. That's the last thing I want to ask you is, when we talk a lot about quarterbacks, you and we always have these discussions about different styles and different offenses and all these things. But there's something that is so captivating about the quarterback position because you can't define it. It's an it factor, it's something that's there. And I think I saw it with JJ McCarthy last summer in the way that the team was already gravitating toward him, even though he wasn't even the guy that was taking first team reps. And even when we watched him the other day, and this again, like that doesn't mean they're winning the Super Bowl and it doesn't mean he's going to the Hall of Fame, but even the other day, we got to watch him throw 10 minutes of warmups. And if you didn't know who was the starting quarterback and who was the guy, you knew who was the guy. Like just out there with the way that he carries himself, having played with Favre, to me, he's the ultimate all-time great. He's the guy. What is that? What is it that I'm trying to describe here?
There's probably people call it probably confidence, or there is like an it factor. I do believe. I mean, there's a likability element to being a quarterback. Back in the old days, quarterbacks would take the line out, the whole offense out for beers, and have a good time, and have a guys' night, and that sort of got the guys to like you. So there is definitely an element, and I know some quarterbacks really struggle with this. They're not comfortable in that role of and there's different versions of it for everybody. You don't want to be disingenuous. You want to have this authentic version of yourself, but you have to sort of find little ways. And sometimes it's just in the practice field, or saying something in the locker room or in the lunchroom, or eating with different people. You have to sort of spread the wealth around the whole organization, around the whole team, even to talk to the equipment guys or the video guys. It's just element of, because there's, you're so important to everybody, and so you make everybody else important to you. I think the guys that sort of have that I think Breeze, since physically he didn't have a big arm and he's only 6 foot tall, his accuracy was incredible. His decision making was incredible. He's a great athlete, but he had so much and a lot of that is grit, and a lot of that is built over time and hard games and tough losses, right? As we're thinking about McCarthy and what his career is so far, and what it is might be this year, and what it might be in the future, it sort of brings me to that scene with Matt Damon from Air, the Michael Jordan movie, about the shoes with Nike, and he gives that speech to Jordan about he'll have success, and then he'll fall down, and then he'll win a championship, and then something bad will happen. Right. And there's that great scene in the offense that sells Jordan on why to go with Nike instead of the other brands. But that is another thing that I learned from Eli, is that Eli was in it for a marathon game. And he knew that losing the game here, or choking here, or a big win here, it's all relative to this like career. He did not sort of get too high, did not get too low. He just sort of stayed at this consistent level, every single day. And that's hard to do when you're a young guy, because every game is so meaningful. My God, I just lost a game in the National Football League, and we were up 10 points in the fourth quarter. We lost it. And you just feel terrible. Happens all the time. It's the NFL. You have terribly excruciating losses every single week in the National Football League that can like tear your heart out. But you can't let it. It just happens. And hopefully you get some of those on the other end where you come back and tear someone else's heart out. But the games are so close. A field goal here, a turnover here. They're so close. They always say their NFL games are really hard to win and really easy to lose. And I think for him to have that mindset of, this is a marathon, I'm going to have bad games, right? But I'm going to have good games, and never really get too high on the good games, and never get too bad on the bad games, because sometimes things just don't go right. You're not feeling it. Receivers, this, that. D linemen's taking advantage of when you're lesser backup offensive lineman, right? There's so many elements to it. You have to sort of stay the course, and as the great Matt Campbell for the Iowa State Cyclones say, trust the process. Just keep trusting the process. You just keep doing it. You just keep chipping away and keep chipping away. And Tom Brady in year 18 and 19, I promise you, he was still trying to find little things to make him throw the ball harder, or make him read something faster. He was still on that grind. And if you want to have a Hall of Fame career, that's what you have to be as a quarterback.
Yeah, I think, that's kind of where we started, was the resilience that's required. And that is the one thing that we don't know about JJ McCarthy until he actually gets out there. It's sort of like everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And we'll see how he deals with that, because you're right. I mean, think about Kirk and the number of things. This is what I always respected about him, is that he could shrug off anything and go to the next week.
Yeah.
You and I were there in Chicago in 2019 when he had about the worst game you could possibly have. Khalil Mack sacked him 3 or 4 times, strip sacked him. The next week, he had a great game, got the season back on track. They made the playoffs. Like that sort of stuff is what keeps Kirk in the league because he's able to put that behind him and then move on to the next week. And that I think is going to be something that McCarthy has to learn to do on the fly. One more thing. I want to know from you who your favorite current quarterback to watch is in the
Hmm.
NFL today. Who is your favorite? The one you enjoy the most, not the best. Doesn't have to be the best, just somebody you like.
Man, that's a good question. I mean, for a lot of people, I think Mahomes has this ceiling and makes these throws that are so simply incredible. That's like, for me, I don't even almost enjoy it because it's like, it's not even real, the throws that he's made over the years. Now, I do think he has to change his game, by the way, to not, you can't get away with that forever. There's a youth ability to be that creator. And then as you get old, it gets a little harder. Gosh, who do I love to watch? I love watching Jordan Love play.
Hmm.
He's the way he sort of bounces around, and he sometimes makes incredible throws. He's got a quick release. I love the Packers offense. It's I think he's going to be really good. I think he watched Aaron Rodgers obviously for a couple of years and learned a lot. He's in a quarterback friendly system. I do enjoy watching that Packers quarterback Jordan Love. I love watching. So when I train kids, like right now, I should say train. I do Zoom calls with some of these top high school quarterbacks. Kid here in Omaha, going to go to Iowa State currently, and Jonas Williams at Chicago, currently going to USC. I love watching Kevin O'Connell's film. Kevin O'Connell's film, I can teach off of so well. The technique is so good by the line, by the tight ends, by the quarterbacks, the receivers, the route depths. Um, it's a very like well structured offense, and so it's again I feel like I can sort of see, okay, I see what Kevin's doing here, or Wes, the offensive coordinator. I can see what they've designed here, and so as far as watching film, I love watching that film from last year of anything in this offseason. Of course, I love watching Brock Purdy play. My Iowa State guy. I love watching him play. He's a lot of fun. But I don't know. That's a good question. Uh, Jordan Love is up there. Um, Stafford's pretty fun to watch, I guess. I don't like watching Russell Wilson. I think Drake May will be a good quarterback. I've known him since he was 17. I think he'll be really good. Jared Goff, I don't, there's a lot about his game and the way he throws the wobbler. Just not great, but the dude seems to come through, a lot of times. Trying to think, no one in the state of Texas that I really love watching play. Who do you like watch play? Maybe you'll pick somebody that I haven't thought of.
Well, I think after last year, Jaden Daniels is a guy that I'm going to be
Oh,
watching for a long time.
of course, that kid. By the way, his dad was a teammate of mine in college.
Oh, really? I
Yeah,
did
I
not know
look
that.
back at an old DM I got on Twitter. This is like January, right before COVID hits in March. I get this DM from Javon Daniels, a teammate of mine in college. It says, "Hey, I got a son. He's a freshman at Arizona State. Love to get together with him, sometime in the off season." And I said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let me know a good time." And boom, COVID hits before we know it. Obviously, that disappears. Never have a DM with that guy. With my old teammate again is Jaden's dad. But then to see him go from Arizona State to LSU and to such a fantastic player last year, he's really good. Like he throws a beautiful ball. He can throw it hard. He can put some air on it and like level the ball. Over the linebackers, under the safeties. His quickness and his sort of slipperiness. He has a slipperiness about him, where when he runs, he seems to sort of get through there without taking a bad hit. RG3 was fast, but he was not slippery. And he protects himself. Slippery quarterbacks protect themselves, and so he's a lot of fun. He's a lot of fun to watch. Yeah, he's probably up there.
What I like about him is that, Sam Darnold went into that Detroit pressure cooker and did not do very well last year. And Jaden Daniels, it looked like it didn't bother him at all. And even when he played against Philadelphia, their defense gave up 50 points because their defense was horrible. And Philadelphia obviously was a machine. But Jaden Daniels never stopped fighting in that game. And I always like to see that of how is somebody handling when it's not going that well. This was a Justin Fields concern I had or a Caleb Williams concern. Those guys seem to give up. If it's not going my way, it's yeah, whatever. I thought Jaden Daniels was a fighter in that game, and nothing seems to shake him. And when you can be that way, that's when all the ups and downs that we were talking about, all those hard things, that guy's going to guide an entire franchise through all that stuff. That's really special when you can find that. So not only is he electric to watch play, but also I did not know about him because you never know till they get in there just what type of mentality he has and his personality. And I just think like that's franchise. That's exactly what you're dreaming of when you draft the top quarterback. And I'm sure Chicago was watching it last year going, maybe we missed that part a
Yeah.
little bit with Caleb Williams, that there's a different, mental makeup, I think, between those two.
Yeah, the maturity of Jane Daniels is really exceptional for a young guy in all the ways. Not just the way he sort of holds himself off the field and press conferences, but just when the way he handles himself after a loss or after on good, he just stays steady, and that's really hard for a young guy to do. So yeah, he might be right now. Then Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes are sort of like they have physical characteristics that almost seem unfair to me, and so they're fun to watch in those ways. But Joe Burrow, I enjoy watching. He diagnoses things really fast. We watched a half of his about a month ago, and he in the first half he never took a second hitch one time. It was back foot hits, plant, throw, one hitch, throw, getting it out, getting it out, getting it out, getting it out. And when you can diagnose stuff that fast as a quarterback and then be extremely accurate, people always have their opinions where with these quarterbacks and how they sort of are. And obviously, Joe is enjoying. He goes to the fashion shows and sort of has this flamboyancy or sort of, but there's a moxie to it, which is sort of enjoy. It's like he doesn't take himself too seriously. But like, wouldn't you do the same thing if you were not a starting quarterback? Like, wouldn't you go to the Paris fashion show and check it all out and be on the watch the people on the runway? Why not, right? And so there's something about that, sort of that little bit of that Dan Marino confidence of he knows he's one of the best quarterbacks in the world, and I sort of like the way he carries himself off the field with all that because honestly, it looks like a lot of fun to me.
Joe Burrow is the quarterback's quarterback, I feel like,
Yeah,
because of the IQ that he has. Sort of like Kevin O'Connell's offense is the quarterback's offense.
that's right.
Everybody, like I remember Peyton Manning last year going into the playoffs saying if he could have any play caller in offense in the entire playoffs, he would take Kevin O'Connell's. You see the JT O'Sullivan breakdowns just showing and the intent, the detail, how clear it is for the quarterback. Orlovsky loves to break it down. Our friend Bobby Peters, who wrote an entire book about the Vikings offense from last year. Now, if we can just get Kevin on the run game a little bit, maybe just pull him out of one of those passing meetings, just get into the run game, then they'll have a complete offense. But this was great, Sage. Always, you and I, the journeyman, and I don't know what I am, but we used to call it something, right? Something with the journeyman. I forget.
What the one shining moment? You get the
We
shining
had I thought we had like a name for when we first started doing a podcast together. This was like must have been 2018 or 2017, and it's something with Journeyman and me, and I don't know what it was,
Well,
but
we used to do on I believe on Wednesdays, we would do like the journeyman quarterback of the week.
oh, that's right,
And
that's
that's
right.
like, it was great. It was like whoever the Vikings were playing,
Yes,
we go back in Wikipedia and look at all the backup quarterbacks and just we pick one and go from there. And you go into these guys, you remember these names from the 80s or 90s, and it's like, well, what happened to him afterwards? It's like, oh, he was arrested with a felony of something in 2004. But like all the things you don't know because everyone sort of disappears and falls off the planet. But great names, Steve DeBerg, names like that, Burline. There's journeyman quarterbacks, but the criteria was 4 teams.
Yep.
You had to have a shining moment,
Yep.
which is a big deal. There's a lot of guys who I was thinking about Charlie Whitehurst the other day. Didn't really have a shining moment, but definitely a journeyman quarterback. And then you got extra credit points if you were on the team 2 different times, 2 stints, because that meant that you're probably a pretty nice guy because they wouldn't have had you back if you weren't. And so, we got to have nice guy journeyman quarterbacks.
There were all these we had a system of bonus points for getting, like, if your Wikipedia had post career something really funny that the guy was doing, or you mentioned, I can't remember who we ran into that got arrested for some felony, but I remember that happening. So,
I do.
uh,
I'm not going to say his name. He was a teammate. So I'm just going to
oh, okay. All right. But, either way, and just a shining moment of my career was having you and Brooks Bollinger on the air and quizzing you about former journeyman quarterbacks that you had played with, and you
yes.
had to guess that journeyman and stuff. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and on the rare occasions I get around other journeyman quarterbacks, it's like it's odd, like conversations just flow, and of course that turns into coaches and offenses and what you didn't like about that offense, what you didn't like about that coach, or throwing to this guy, or I mean, there's so many. The height of your center, and this guy really had to squat down. Chris Myers had to squat down basically on the ground because he was so low. The other guy should basically stand up, throw your hand right there. So there's so many things that quarterbacks can talk about, and so whenever a few journeyman backups get in the same room together, like I was at Zach Thomas's event, it was a lot of fun talking to those guys.
I love that the show is going to end with you saying, I was thinking about Charlie Whitehurst the other day. Like, that's such a
Yeah.
great, just a
Oh, I
great
was thinking
place.
about it. You know why? Because we with the Giants, when I backed up Eli,
Mhm.
we played out in Seattle. We were up 35-7 or 35-0 at halftime. Eli just on fire, and Charlie Whitehurst started for the other team. If it was still Hasselback or if he was out or what. And I got thrown in the fourth quarter. You can look this up. 14 minutes and I believe 17 seconds left in the game. We got the ball on our own 5 or 10 yard line. We go 17 plays. I kneel down to end the game on the 5-yard line on the other side. Did not throw one pass on the drive. 17 handoffs, end the game. I believe it was the longest drive, maybe the longest drive in NFL history. And I did not throw a pass.
So your stat line is 0 for 0 and 3 runs for -3 yards.
That's right. That's right. And not only that, here's the funny story at the end. The coach calls kneel down. And I go, okay, we're going to kneel it down, victory formation. Rich Soybert, who's our center, looks up at the stats on the screen. We have exactly 200 yards rushing, and he goes, "If you fucking lose a yard on this, I'm going to kill you." So I snap and try to not kneel down next to his foot basically, and the defense didn't come off or anything. I did that 3 straight times. It didn't matter. They'd lose the yard every single time, and so we ended up with 197. So that's the funny story of that game. So yeah, somehow I was talking about that game the other day to somebody, and Charlie Whitehurst came into my mind. But the reason he doesn't get that journeyman backup stats is because he did not, I don't believe, really have a shining moment.
No, yeah, there's levels to this.
We are
So
Jewel though. We did Jewel for a while though, or married her or something like that. So I think that would come. I guess if you marry a recording artist, maybe that counts. I don't know.
that's your shining moment. That's perfect. Sage Rosenfels, you are the best, man. I'm always sometimes when we talk off the air, I think like that should have been an entire podcast because people would have loved it. So I'm glad that we could do this now, and we will definitely connect very soon in the future. Thank you very much, my friend.
All right. Thanks for having me on.